All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and start the training session now. I would ask that everyone please be sure to mute your microphones. I will try to, on my end, mute them, and then when we get to a question and answer portion, unmute everybody at the same time. So welcome, my name is Chad Tucker. I'm the Smart Scale Program Manager. We figured we'd start off today's training session with a recap of the changes that the board has adopted for round 3 of the Smart Scale process. Then Aziz is going to walk y'all through how to administer, sort of a refresher on how to administer your organization, how to set up new users, and then we're going to jump into the actual demo of the portal. There's been a bunch of changes this year, a bunch of enhancements that we'd like to go over with you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start. What I'm going to be covering here with the CTB changes is changes to the schedule, the application caps that the board adopted, and the number of applications that can be submitted per applicant, and then changes that the board adopted with respect to project readiness and project eligibility. So the first item is the schedule. You'll remember in the last 2 rounds, we had a fairly compressed schedule. There was a 2-month intake period, application intake period that started in August and ended on October 1st. And this was, a fairly limited amount of time for applicants to create their applications, to work through all the details and cost estimates with their state counterparts. And then we had the validation screening, which really overlapped with the project evaluation and scoring process. And this typically went throughout the months of October and November. And this is looking for things such as, is the project eligible for Smart Scale? Is the information in the application reasonable and accurate? And does the project meet an identified VTrans need? And then, of course, the actual evaluation and scoring process, which was about a 3-month window to collect all the data that's needed, any studies, and actually calculate each of the measures that's used for scoring. Now, some of these measures are interdependent upon one another. So that 3-month window really, there's a lot of work that's being compressed into that 3 months. So what the board has done is actually moved the round 3 schedule up. So normally we wouldn't be starting until August. We're actually going to be starting next month on March 1st. And you'll have 3 months to submit basic information about your project, what we're going to refer to as the pre-application. On June 1st, all the pre-applications are going to need to be entered into the system and submitted. And you'll have the option to request that your project be pre-screened. And then the final 2 months, no new applications can be created. You can only refine the applications that you entered and submitted by June 1st. So that last 2 months is really sort of refining, finishing up the application, and then submitting by the August 1st deadline. You'll also notice on the screening and measure development portion, we're going to have an extra 2 months. So on the application side, there's an extra 3 months. On the scoring side, there's an extra 2 months. Hopefully round 3 will be a little less stressful for everybody. Now, for the application caps, in round 1, we had a total of 321 projects submitted. And in round 2, it jumped up fairly significantly. It went up to 436, which was a 36% increase. We also saw a fairly sizable increase in the number of applications that we had to score after validation and screening. So it jumped up from 287 in round 1 to 404. So the concern was, if we get 1,000, 1,200 applications, even with a 5-month window, the process potentially could collapse under its own weight. And we do want to encourage applicants to focus on quality as opposed to quantity, and really take time to work with your local and regional leaders to establish priorities of what is the most important projects to submit to the state for consideration for funding. With that, the CTB adopted a two-tiered process for establishing caps for the number of applications, and it's based on population either at the local or the regional level. So for localities that have less than 200,000 in population, or for regions that have less than 500,000 in population, the application cap is capped at 4. For Tier 2, the local, if it's greater than 200,000 at the local level or greater than 500,000 at the regional level, the cap is capped at 3.
Okay.
All right. Please be sure to mute your microphone. As in round 1 and 2, the CTB may submit up to 2 applications per cycle. And in the last 2 rounds, there's only been 1 project that was submitted, and that was in round 2 by the CTB. There is a new provision, and this is based on feedback that we received in the lead up to round 3 policy changes, where there are towns that are unincorporated who are concerned that, you know, because they're not eligible to submit applications with the application caps, if their county that they're in didn't submit their application, there is a provision that the CTB can grant in each district in a situation where a county has reached their application cap and there is a unincorporated town within there that has a project that they would like to submit. The CTB member can grant that jurisdiction, that county, 1 additional application, but it's only 1 per round per district. So if you're a town or you're a county that has a town that's find yourself in that situation, you'll need to work through your district and with your board member if you want to get that approved. And we're able to manage that on our end through the portal. Another tweak to the policy regarding eligibility to submit is requirements related to locally submitted projects. Last year, any project submitted on a quarter of statewide significance or for quarter of statewide significance need required a resolution of support from the relevant regional entity, and that's the same this year. The change here is sort of highlighted is for regional networks, UDAs, and safety needs that fall within an MPO boundary and that are submitted by the locality. That locality will need to get a resolution of support from the MPO if the project is not consistent with or identified in the regionally adopted CLRP. If it is identified or consistent with the adopted CLRP, then no resolution of support is needed. So that's a key difference here and something that localities within MPO areas are going to need to be mindful of, as well as the MPOs, to make sure that you're working to get those resolutions if your project falls into that category. Now, on the project readiness front, the board really sought to strengthen the policy with regard to the required level of project planning. And what this means is just making sure that the projects have been sort of thought through, and particularly projects that are bigger and more complex and have more associated risk with them. So one of the things that was done is really formalizing policies that we've operated under in the previous rounds, and then there are some new policy requirements. So what we're formalizing within the Smart Scale policy or technical guide is the requirement that if it's a new interchange on a limited access facility, there must be an IJR with a preferred alternative identified. If it's a modification to an existing interchange, then it would be a fairly basic traffic and safety study that typically is going to be required for those. If it's a new signal, that signal really should meet the spacing standards and have met signal warrants and be justified. So again, those are things that were really in place in the previous rounds that have just been formalized within the CTD Smart Scale policy. The new policy requirements relate to if you're proposing a grade separation of a currently at-grade intersection. So say it's a signal and you're proposing to convert it to a grade separated diamond or park low, then at grade, you have to show that at grade improvement options have been assessed and eliminated in some sort of planning process. And this doesn't require, a very expensive study, but just shows that you've looked at and considered how you might improve the existing at grade options and have ruled those out that they're not going to be effective. For major widenings, what we're going to be looking for is that you've gone through a planning process to look at, can the existing capacity be optimized? And are there alternatives to constructing new lanes, and has that been evaluated as part of the planning process? Again, it doesn't need to be an expensive consultant study, but just due diligence with respect to, is there an alternative to just adding additional travel lanes? Are there things that we can do to make the existing corridor more effective through optimizing it? And then the final bullet here is a requirement that regardless of who is submitting or who the applicant is, that they have a resolution of support from their governing body. So if it's a PDC submitted project, the Planning District Commission has included or uploaded with the application as a resolution of support from the PDC. Same from the MPO or from the locality if it's a county or a city. And really the reason for that is in order to adopt a resolution of support for the project, that project would have had to have been discussed in a public meeting, and the public had the opportunity to provide input on that. There have been a couple of projects in previous rounds where that didn't happen, and the public was sort of surprised by the project that got funded, and that we see as kind of a risk item. We want to make sure that each applicant has gone through a public involvement process and has, publicly adopted their support for the projects that they're submitting for Smart Scale. Now, the other item I wanted to touch on is regarding the project eligibility. And there have been rules in place for project eligibility since the first round, but we've just really been trying to clarify what the intended purpose and what the eligible projects are for Smart Scale. And one area that we've had several projects that have gotten submitted in the previous two rounds are really projects that are aimed at maintenance or state of good repair. And those aren't eligible for Smart Scale. There's a separate program called the State of Good Repair Program and other maintenance pots of monies that can be used to address asset condition. So if the project scope is mostly the repair or replacement of existing assets, then it's not eligible for Smart Scale. So an example would be we want to upgrade and replace the signal system, replace the mast arms and the signal heads. Or we want to replace a bridge with slightly wider lanes, or maybe replace the bridge but also add, pet accommodation. In those instances, most of the project cost is related to the repair or replacement of existing assets. And there are examples where it would be eligible. So if there's a project that's constructing turn lanes and providing a shared use path, and those require the upgrade of the signal system in order to facilitate those new movements, or perhaps the existing equipment is in the way, then that upgrade would be an eligible cost because it's required as part of a larger improvement to the corridor. Similarly, you could have a bridge replacement project that's funded through State of Good Repair, and you're submitting for Smart Scale money to add a sidewalk as part of that replacement project. So those would be examples of projects that involve a State of Good Repair that would be eligible for Smart Scale. Now, another issue is clarifying that Smart Scale is not intended to replace existing committed funds at the local or regional level. It's not intended to replace proffers and monies from other funding sources. So If a project is fully funded, it is not eligible for Smart Scale. If a project element is a proffered condition from a developer, you're not able to submit for Smart Scale in order to replace that proffered condition with Smart Scale money. There is an exception for mega-type projects that exceed $1 billion. And there's some very specific requirements that must be met. In other words, it cannot have been eligible to have been submitted in the previous round because it wasn't ready. But in order to keep that project moving forward, and perhaps to get a record of decision from the feds, the locality or the region had to show it as fully funded. And in that particular case, they would be able to put in to solicit or seek some Smart Scale funding for that project and have it scored. Another clarification is if the requested funding is to add components to an existing fully funded project, then the requested components are going to be analyzed independently. And I'll give you an example. If there is a fully funded project to widen a corridor from 2 to 4 lanes, and an applicant puts in to have a shared use path added to that project, then we are going to analyze that project as sort of a standalone shared use path along that corridor. And then the final bullet on this page is the relationship of the project elements. The project elements need to be associated with one another. They need to be contiguous or they need to be of the same improvement type. So an example that has come up that this is sort of aimed at would be, we want to improve this corridor, and then 4 or 5 miles away, we want to construct a park and ride lot. That would not be eligible per this new policy, assuming that those aren't serving or improving the same corridor. So we just want to make sure that all the project elements are associated, and different unassociated improvement types aren't associated with the project being submitted for evaluation. So an example, and these are not real projects, they're just projects we made up for illustrative purposes. On the left-hand side here is a project to install bus pullouts and bus shelters along 2 intersecting routes that have bus service today. That would be eligible because it's similar improvement types, even though they might not necessarily be contiguous to one another. Not eligible would be, say, an example where we're constructing or requesting construction of an auxiliary lane between 2 interchanges, and then there's a park and ride lot 9 miles away that's been, you sort of piggybacked onto that improvement. In this particular instance, we would deem that not to be contiguous, not to be a related project element, and as such would work with the applicant to request, which of these projects is the highest priority that you want to pick. So it's not like as if we just screened it out. We would work with the applicant to try to make adjustments to the application to make it eligible. And then before we get into the presentation from Aziz on org administration, I did want to cover some tweaks that were made to the measures by the CTB to just make sure everybody is aware of those. So I've kind of gone over more of the process and administrative related issues, but on the measure development, which is how we're going to evaluate each of the improvements, there are some modifications that are going to be in place here coming into round 3. So for congestion, in the previous 2 rounds, we looked at a 10-year planning horizon where we looked 10 years into the future. The board has directed us to look at current day. So this is going to be something that will affect how we look at congestion analysis, only looking at the current day traffic. For safety, we are removing DUI crashes, and we'll be using a blended rate for fatal and severe injury crashes. There's no changes to the accessibility. For land use, we will have a new methodology in place where we're looking at access to non-work destinations. And these would be things like grocery, education, healthcare, and uses a similar tool or the same tool that we use for access to jobs under the accessibility measure. For economic development, there are a number of changes here. We are removing the points for consistency with the local and regional plans. Now you'll get points if they're specifically referenced. Also, projects within economically distressed areas are going to get up to an additional ½ a point. Zone properties must be getting primary or direct access from the project. So a zone property 3 miles away is no longer going to be eligible. It has to be zone properties adjacent to the transportation project being proposed. And then we will be distinguishing between conceptual site plans and detailed site plans and how we assign points. So if you've got a development site that has a submitted conceptual site plan, you get ½ a point. If it's an approved conceptual site plan, you get 1 point. If it's a submitted detailed site plan, you get 2 points. And if it's a approved detailed site plan, you get 4 points. And detailed site plans are defined as sort of construction-ready documents. These would be documents where the site will actually be approved, and typically are going to be the plans that the developer submits right before they go out and start constructing the site. We also are reducing the buffer max from 5 miles to 3 miles, and we'll have a 10 million square foot cap. It can be exceeded, but there will be additional documentation that the applicant's going to have to provide to show that that's a reasonable amount of development that the project's going to support. And then last is under the economic development, the intermodal access. Before we had a tonnage-based approach where points were applied by, multiplied by the tonnage of freight that moves along the corridor. We noticed that the measure really wasn't scaling to the size or length of the improvement. So for round 3, we will be multiplying that initial measure from round 1 and 2 by the length of the improvement to better scale for the size of the improvement. And with that, I'm going to turn it over here to Aziz, and he's going to walk you through the SMART portal and how to manage, as the organization administrator, if you have that role, how to manage users. And Aziz, hold on here while I unmute you. All right, talk. All right, bear with me.
That's on my end.
That's what I heard.
All right, everybody, please be sure that your phone is muted. All right, Aziz, I'm going to call the audible here, and I'm going to go ahead and run through it because for whatever reason the unmute is not working. So hopefully everybody can still hear me. So if you're the organization administrator, what that means is you have the ability to administer staff within your organization. So if you're a city or a town or a PDC, if you have the org administrator role, and each organization does have a person identified as that, then you have the ability to sort of set up users and, more importantly, to assign roles and responsibilities to those. If you don't know who has that role, please contact your district or DRPT point of contact, and we'll make sure that you get set up with an org administrator role. So this is when you log in here under this little thing on the right-hand side. If you drop this down, you can administer users within your organization. And so in this particular example, you can see all the users, you can add a new user, and you can edit. More importantly, you can edit. And you need to make sure if you've got a person that gets set up with an account and they log into the SMART portal and they don't see any of the applicable application programs like Smart Scale or Revenue Sharing or TAP. And what that means is they just haven't been assigned permissions to those individual programs yet. So when you click on a particular user, then you're able to see all the roles that that user has. And you see here that HB2 is from the previous or the first round of Smart Scale, but you also see HSIP, Revenue Sharing, Smart Scale, and up here on the top right is where you can create a new user. That's when you put in their name, what organization, and you can expand the roles. So if you want to see the different permissions that exist under each program, click Expand All Roles, and you're able to go in and grant permissions. So just to kind of recap, a viewer can only view. So this might be somebody that you want to go in and review applications, but you don't necessarily want them to be able to create or edit applications. Editor role is someone that can create applications and can edit them, but does not have the permission to be able to submit the application. And then the submitter role can do everything. They can see the applications, they can create new applications, they can edit them, but they also can submit them. And this is a similar permission structure that exists for all the different application programs. So once you've gone into edit mode and you've assigned your permissions, then you're able to hit Save User. Now, one important responsibility of the org administrators is to go in and periodically review, particularly if you have turnover within your organization, and make sure anyone that needs to be archived gets archived. Otherwise, they'll still be able to go in and make edits. So if you've got an employee that's left and gone to a different job, you would want to make sure that you go in here and archive that particular user so they don't have access to the system anymore. Now, on the pre-application, before we get into the portal demo, I did want to go over sort of what the pre-application is. That's something new this year, and it replaces the notice of intent that we had last year. You'll remember last year we had a 2-week window at the very beginning of the intake where we asked for basic information. Essentially, the pre-application replaces that. The big difference is rather than 2 weeks, you actually have 3 months to complete and submit the pre-application. The pre-application submission deadline is June 1st. So that first 3 months, you have until June 1st to submit your pre-application. After June 1st, no new applications can be created in the portal. You can only edit the pre-applications that you submitted by June 1st. And once you hit submit, you go into the full application and are able to continue working. The pre-application, the purpose for it is really designed to help assess risk for project eligibility and project readiness, and also give you the ability to get feedback sooner rather than later. In previous rounds, folks might not find out until December that they've been screened out. We feel like it's very important for us to try to provide feedback on potential risk earlier so the applicant can adjust their application accordingly. An important thing to note is you're not limited to the number of pre-applications you can create and submit. The application caps come in with respect to the number that you can request pre-screening on and the number that you can submit for the final submission at the end. Once the pre-application is submitted, as I mentioned, you will immediately go into the full application. But an important note is once you've submitted, you can't edit the pre-application after it's been submitted. You would be doing those edits in the full application. Now, pre-screening and how that's different. Pre-screening is the ability for applicants to request from the state an assessment of whether or not the project meets a VTrans need, whether or not the project is eligible, and whether or not the project is ready. It is completely optional, and I will show you here in the demo how it works. When you get to the end of the pre-application, you have the ability to say, yes, I want to be pre-screened. It's an initial assessment based on the project details that you put into the pre-application. And And that's important. It is an initial assessment. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you've got an interchange improvement, and you said, hey, the IJR is going to be complete by August 1st. And we look at it and we say, hey, well, that looks eligible, the project looks ready, and then you get to the submission deadline and there's been a delay and isn't going to be until December that interchange justification report's going to be completed. So while the initial assessment might have said, hey, it looks like you're going to screen in, you know, because of that delay, the project might be at risk of screening out. Now, the final official screening is going to occur after August 1st. And we'll have to take into account any new information or significant changes that might have occurred to the project's location or scope from the initial assessment that occurred during pre-screening. But do know that this is really designed to try to give you feedback early so you have the ability to be able to adjust from there. The application caps, as I mentioned before, set by the CTV, affect the number of projects you can request pre-screening on and the number of applications that you can submit for your final submission. And the cap on the number to request pre-screening is really just meant to manage resources on our end. So with that, I am going to unmute everybody and see if there are any questions. And I hope this goes well.
Hi, can you hear me?
I apologize. We got some really bad feedback. All right. It doesn't look like Q&A is going to work because of the feedback for the number of people that don't have their mics muted. So with that, I'm going to go into the portal demo portion of this, and hopefully we'll be able to resolve the audio issues, because I really would like the opportunity for folks to be able to ask questions, because I know this is a lot of information to digest. Now, I did include in this presentation, I'm not going to go through these screenshots, but there are screenshots that you can reference later on that are going to essentially walk through a lot of the same stuff that I'm going to go over here live for y'all. We thought it would be helpful to have these screenshots so you'd have a reference afterwards and wouldn't necessarily have to watch the entire video recording that we're doing. So from the SmartScale website, and I'll show you that here real quick. You go up to the top right and you can sign into the portal, same as has always been. And you'll come to a login screen that looks like this. Now do note this is a test site. We're still in the testing and development portion. So a lot of what you see today is you're not going to be able to see until March 1st. But I do want to walk you through how the new portal functionality works. So once you log in, here on the first screen is where you're going to see all the application programs that you have permissions to see. So in this case, I've got SmartScale, TAP, Revenue Sharing, and 8SIP. If I want to go into the applications portion of SmartScale, then I can click here. And this is where you're going to go to your dashboard. Now, if you wanted to create a new application, then what you would do is click New Application up here. You would select the applicable program, in this case, the SmartScale pre-application. And you can either clone a previous application or you can create new. Now, for the purpose of this demo, I've already got some example projects that we've set up in the system. So we're going to start with example project 1. Now, once the application comes up, you sort of come up, it comes into the application in a view mode. And if you want to edit the application, you actually have to click a button that says edit. And bear with me with the network. All right, so here's my application, and this is what it would look like if you created a new application. You would come into this screen, just everything would be blank. So you'll see here I can't make any changes to the application. I have to go up here, similar to previous rounds, and click Edit Pre-Application. Here's what I would type in, and you'll see the pearls here along the top. There's a general pearl, which is very similar to what you've seen in other application programs and previously for SmartScale. But you're going to see some new pearls here: project eligibility, project readiness. You've seen the location pearl before, and then a new pearl for supporting documents. Now, a couple of things I'll point out here before I go through is these little information hover boxes. That's going to give you helpful information about what we're looking for that particular field. And anywhere you see the little blue I button, you can just hover over that, and it's going to give you some help text. So you've got basic point of contact information, the project title, what's the principal improvement type. And remember there, that's just the main categories. Is it bus transit, highway, rail freight? What is the principal or main improvement type? The project title, and then there's a short description and a more detailed description. Now, the short description is what's going to show up on the scorecards, and the detailed description really allows you to break down in detail what the project is doing. Now, one thing you may have heard me say before for other training sessions is why you're doing the project is not as important as what you are doing. So I would focus for this project detailed description on specifically what the project is physically doing. So in this case, we're constructing a 5-foot sidewalk. We've got the termini here. We've got the length. We're showing where we're installing crosswalks along the roadway. To really get into the details, specifically what the project is doing and where. Now, one new thing that you'll see here is this VDOT district. Until you've located your project on the map, it's hard for us to be able to filter and manage workflows on our end. So this is a new functionality that, depending on who you are, this might already be pre-populated. If you're a jurisdiction that falls completely within a particular VDOT district, then it's already going to be selected for you. But if you're an entity that crosses district boundaries, and so a good example would be the Lynchburg MPO, then you're going to have two choices there. Are you in Salem or are you in Lynchburg? And that's going to allow the staff from that particular district to be able to filter your project down and be able to look at it and review it and provide you feedback and comments in the system until such a point that you've actually located the project on the map. Now, at the bottom, you'll see this Save Application. I do recommend that you save frequently to avoid losing work. And then if you click Next, we're going to go to the next pearl. So similar as before, we do have the comment functionality. You are able to tag your comment to specific sections. So if you wanted to have a comment, say in project eligibility, then you can tag it to project eligibility, and it just makes it easier to know what that particular comment is associated with. So that's a new functionality for this particular round. And then I'll show the Review Submission Readiness button here towards the end. So I'm going to click Next. That's going to take me to project eligibility. You also can click the pearl to go to the next section. Now, project eligibility, think of it as a wizard, like a TurboTax wizard. It's really meant to, it's asking questions, and based on your responses, you may get asked some follow-up questions. And all of it's geared towards assessing whether or not the project is eligible. So I'll give you an example. This is the project a study. So this is a sidewalk project. It's not a study, so I'll say no. But if I were to click yes, then I'm going to get some some feedback that, hey, your project's at risk for screening out because studies are not eligible for smart scale. Is it a capacity expansion project? So in this case, yes. And then you can drop down underneath each one of these, you can drop down and get the actual features. So as part of the pre-application, you are being asked to identify all the features that are associated with your project. So in this case, I'm constructing a sidewalk and I'm improving a bike ped crossing at grade. Does the project include in-kind repair or replacement of traffic control devices or bridges? In that case, it's no. Are the features contiguous or proximate to one another? Yep. Is it currently fully funded in a capital improvement program or an MPO tip? The answer here is no. Does the project include a commitment by a developer? So remember those things I went over in the previous presentation. That's where these questions are starting to get at. You know, do you fall into one of these categories that's going to indicate a potential for risk? So I finished answering these questions. Now I'm going to go to project readiness. Project readiness is driven by what you select in your features for project eligibility. And these will get pre-checked based on the features that you've checked. So in this particular case, none of the project features are suggesting any risk, so there's no follow-up questions that get asked in this particular example. So for all intents and purposes, in this particular project example, we're done. We can move on to the next portion, which is the location portal. Now this should look fairly familiar. We do have the VTrans needs here, where you select what need you feel your project is addressing as part of VTrans. And then this is the new mapping functionality or mapping tool that's built in. And a couple of things I'll go over. You can go to a full screen mode, which makes it a little bit easier to see. You have the ability to turn on different base maps. So if you wanted to see the streets or imagery with labels, you've got a different assortment of base maps that you can turn on and off depending on your preference. You can also zoom to a particular place or address using the search button here. And then if you're zoomed way out and you want to zoom back to your project, click there and it's going to zoom to your project extent. Now the first thing you're going to get here is you want to draw your project area. And after you click that, you can start clicking on the map and drawing the polygon. In this case, I've already drawn part of the improvement. But you're not limited to one polygon. You can actually add areas. So I'm going to click Add Area, and I want to draw the crosswalks for this particular improvement. You see I just click, and then double click to finish it. And then I can add another area. Say I want crosswalks over here on this side. And now my project is mapped. I can edit a particular feature by clicking the Edit Project area here. And that's going to allow me to go in. Oh, cancel. I can remove a feature, zoom to. And once I'm finished with the drawing, I click Next Step, and it's going to initiate the VTrans Need Wizard. And what this is doing is, based on the polygon that I've drawn, it is geospatially querying all the quarter of statewide significance needs that are in the vicinity of my project, and it sorts them based on the distance to the project. So you'll see here I've already selected that, hey, this project I feel is meeting this east-west quarter safety need. And once you click that box, it's going to come up here to this justification window automatically. And this is where you would just type out, how your project is addressing that particular need. You can click and go to the next need in the list, or you can return to the list. So again, I'll demonstrate. Click here, you type in your justification, and then return to your list. And I'm now associating geospatially my project to each of these needs. Once I'm finished with quarters of statewide significance, I can click Next Step, and it's going to go to the next need category that I checked above. In this particular case, the regional network need. Here you can see I've already selected 2 of them. I can go in and edit my justification by clicking the Edit button. And then when I click here, it's going to go to the next need box that I checked, which in this case is a safety need. Very similarly, you check the need, you provide your justification, and what you're going to notice is down here below, you're starting to get a summary of all your need justifications for your project. And that helps us on our end review the different needs that you tagged your project to. Now, one of the things I'll point out, and this I believe was an issue last year, is what if you have a safety need or you've done a safety study and there's a safety need identified that doesn't show up on this list. There's new functionality now, or down here at the bottom, you can click, you have an additional safety need, and you can click this, and it's going to prompt you, you have to add a new safety need or type in your need, your justification, and you are going to be required to upload the safety study that supports that safety need. So this is very similar to the way we've operated in previous rounds, but here within the actual portal, you have the option to sort of check this. If you've got a safety study that's been done that shows there's a safety problem, and you can upload it here. And that will be used for evaluating the project as meeting a need on a safety, for safety. So when I go click Next Step here, I'm going to go to the Final Summary tab, and that's where the system is going to map essentially all the needs that I've associated my project with. Now I can go to the supporting documents. So there's a dedicated supporting documents PERL, and it's going to tell me what I need to upload. So in this particular case, Project Sketch is required for all the pre-applications. You have to upload a project sketch. Now later on in the full application, you could refine that sketch, but initially we are going to require a project sketch for the pre-application. And that's just as simple as clicking Add a New Attachment, go in here to your project sketch and attach it, type in your description. You have to associate the specific attachment type, which in this case is a project sketch, and then upload. And now my attachment is uploaded, and the little warning box has gone away. Now what I can do is down here at the bottom, I can click Review Submission Readiness. If you click this and there are any issues or missing fields that are required, you're going to get some warning messages that are going to pop up, and little numbers will appear on the number of things that need to be addressed in each of the sections before you can submit the project. In this particular case, I've already filled it completely out. This is where you can say whether or not you want your app to be pre-screened, yes or no. So if you want to be pre-screened and have a team at VDOT and DRPT and OIPI look at your project and give you feedback on whether or not the project meets a VTrans need, whether or not it's ready or whether or not it's eligible, then you can click this button here and say yes. If you do not want to do that, you can say no. It's totally your call. But you'll notice here that I'm limited to the number that I can request pre-screening for. So this would be my first one of 4 that I can request pre-screening for. And then you certify the application is correct to the best of your ability, and then you hit the submission button. Once you do that, you'll go into the full application and you'll be able to continue working on this. And if you've requested pre-screening, that's going to initiate a workflow on our end to review the application and provide you feedback through the portal as to whether or not we feel your project is going to screen in or not. And there will be a system-generated email that will provide that information back to you. So once this saves, I'm going to go to our project example number 2. All right, so here's example project number 2. As before, it's going to default to a view mode. I'm going to click Edit Pre-Application. And here I've already got some information filled in. In this particular project example, it's a quarter widening and a super street conversion. So I've got my project details here. I'm going from a 2-lane to a 4-lane facility. It does include a bridge replacement, widening. I've got the structure ID there. It's got some turn lanes that are being constructed on the northbound approach. You'll see here very specific. It's telling me quantities, location, lengths. Got a new signal that's coming in at the intersection of Road Z, and I'm converting the intersection to an R-cut, 2 intersections to an R-cut. So here, it's not a study. It is a capacity enhancement. So I'm going to start dropping down on boxes. I am adding new through lanes. I'm doing some turn lane improvements. It involves an innovative intersection. You can click here to get in from, or hover here for more information, and this is also going to take you to our innovative intersection webpage. I've got a new traffic signal. And then I've got a bridge replacement. I'm replacing an existing bridge. So here it's asking, does your project involve the repair or replacement of traffic control devices or bridge rehabilitation? I'm going to say yes, because it does involve a bridge. Does your project involve the replacement of a bridge? Yes. Is the bridge replacement needed to facilitate additional lane capacity under the bridge? On or under the bridge? And in this case, yes. I need to replace that bridge in order to facilitate the widening. Does the project include replacement of signal system? Now, had here I said no, I don't. I'm just replacing the bridge. And it's going to ask another follow-up question. If I say no there, you'll see that your responses, each of your responses, is sort of getting at whether or not there's a potential for risk here. Does the project involve reconstructing a roadway in kind on existing alignment? So I'm going to say no here. Are the project features contiguous, approximate? Yep. Not fully funded. Doesn't have a proper. So now I'm going to go to my readiness. Now you'll notice here, now I've got some stuff checked. And that's because there's 2 items from the features on the previous Pearl that are now prompting some follow-up questions with respect to readiness. So my project involves a new traffic signal. Now I'm being asked questions, does the proposed signal meet VDOT spacing standards? If I say no, then I'm going to get a potential risk. If I say yes, then I'm good. What is the status of the signal warrant? Now here you've got three choices. You can say it's not started, which is going to give you a risk, or it could be underway. This is where you can provide information about the status and when you anticipate it's going to be completed. Alternatively, let's say your signal warrant analysis is done, you've worked with the district and you have that. Now it's going to ask you to upload that particular study. So if I say it's complete, I'm going to get a prompt, and under my supporting documents, I'm going to need to upload that signal warrant and justification study. So in this particular case, we'll say it's complete. Does it include assessment of innovative intersections? Yep. And now for my project widening, will the project include construction of 2 or more general purpose lanes? If I say yes, then I'm going to get some follow-up questions. What is the status of the planning assessment to assess alternatives to optimize the existing capacity? And say that's complete. And then you are going to get some of these features up here indicate potential for risk related to NEPA. So in this particular instance, you're just saying, what is the status of NEPA? If it's not started underway, you're not going to get any warnings for any of these. It's just giving us some indication. If you say have a new location facility that hasn't gone through NEPA, the feds might require multiple alternatives analysis, and the CTB has a policy saying that in that particular situation, the multiple alternatives analysis needs to be complete, the preferred alternative identified, and that's the project that you're submitting for funding. And then similarly here, I'm not going to go through this again, but you have the ability to add your project area in, tag your project to the different needs, just as I showed before, by selecting the particular need and providing the justification. And then on the supporting documents, you'll see here now I've got some more stuff that I need to upload. So I've got to upload the project sketch. I've also got to upload the planning safety study. And then there's a signal warrant. Oop. So now I've satisfied all the supporting documents that I'm required to upload based on my responses. And I can go down here and click Review Submission Readiness. You'll see here I got a warning that I haven't completed my VTrans need categories. So I go here to location, and I'm able to address that. So the system's going to give you feedback if your your pre-application is not complete and there's anything that you need to go fix before you hit submit. Now we're going to go to project example 3. All right. So project example 3 is a little extreme of an example, but this is an example that's going to show you one that's going to get tripped up because the project is either not eligible or not ready. So here I've got a bridge replacement. I'm increasing the lane width of the bridge from 10 to 12-foot lanes. I'm constructing a parking ride 3 miles away. I'm building a new interchange and a new connector road over to Reliance Drive, and then a new signal at the intersection of that new connector road and Reliance Drive. So in this case, it's not a study. It is a capacity enhancement. I've gone through here and checked, it's widening, it's a roadway on new alignment, it's got a new intersection and a new traffic signal, new interchange. So here, yes, it is a bridge replacement. Does it involve the replacement or rehab of a bridge? Yep. Is the bridge replacement needed to facilitate additional lane capacity? Nope. And is it being built to accommodate other features? Has the bridge replacement been fully funded by other sources? I'll say no. And now I get, because I am adding a little bit slightly wider lanes. You'll remember going from 10 to 12-foot lanes. But if that replacement isn't funded with SGR, then the majority or most of that project or that bridge cost is the replacement of existing asset. And so when I answer no here, now I'm getting the feedback that, hey, this project's at risk for screening out because of this. Is the project features contiguous or approximate? You'll remember this one had a park and ride 3 miles away. So in this case, I answer no, and I'm getting feedback my project's at risk. Is it fully funded, or does it have a proffer? I'll just check no to those. And then I go to my project readiness, and you'll see I've got a lot of things checked here that I've got some follow-up questions. What is the status of the IJR? If I say it's not started, I'm going to get feedback that the project's at risk. If I say it's underway and I describe it, but it's not anticipated to be complete until November 1st, now I'm going to get another feedback item saying that, hey, it's at risk. But if I anticipate it's going to be done, let's say in July 1st, which is before the submission deadline, then you're just going to get a reminder to be sure to upload the IJR prior to submitting the final application. And if I've got a new traffic signal, does it meet spacing standards? If I say no, I'm going to get some feedback. And if I say that the signal one analysis has not started or is going to be complete well after the submission deadline, I'm going to get a warning. Now, one thing I'll point out, these warnings do not prohibit you from submitting the pre-application or requesting pre-screening. This is just meant to give you feedback sooner rather than later with a prompt to, hey, contact your SmartScale point of contact for more information so that we can work with you to figure out the things we can do to modify your application to make the project eligible or to find a project that is eligible. And then similarly for new location facilities, what is the status? If it's not started or if it's underway and it's going to be complete until after the submission deadline, you're going to start getting these risk items. And then, of course, I've already gone over this. You map your project location, you upload your supporting documents, and you're good to go. And you can submit for pre-screening up to your maximum cap. So this third example was just meant to give you a feel for, hey, if you've got a project with a lot of potential risk, you're going to start to get that feedback in the application as a result. All right, and that pretty much wraps up the demo. I will attempt to do the questions here again, and I do ask everyone who is listening right now, be sure that your phone is muted so that we don't get feedback issues and all, and we can have a Q&A session. So only unmute if you're going to ask a question.
This is Remy. Can you hear me?
I can.
I have a question going all the way back to eligible and non-eligible projects. Is there a guideline? Because I wasn't able to clearly distinct what you were trying to get at versus, at what is or is not eligible.
Is this in the presentation, the lead-in presentation?
Sorry?
Is this related to the lead-in presentation?
Correct.
Okay. All right, let me pull that up. Was this slide here?
Yes.
I could use that too.
All right. So what this is meant to convey is projects that relate solely to maintenance or state of good repair are not eligible for the Smart Scale program. The Smart Scale program is operation, capacity improvements, things of that nature. So the policy the board has adopted is if the project scope is mostly the repair or replacement of existing assets, then it's not eligible. And the reason for this sort of loose definition is after round one, we saw this as an issue. We were getting a lot of bridge replacement projects that were submitted, or we were getting a lot of signal system projects that were being submitted. And there are separate dedicated pots of funds that are used for that purpose, used for maintenance and replacement of assets. So what we found in round two is the project still was mostly the repair or replacement of existing assets, but a sprinkling of something that was eligible was added in. So I'll give you an example. We want to replace the mast arms and signal heads, for 5 intersections adjacent to one another, but we also want to put in crosswalks. Well, the crosswalks are eligible, but the mast arms and the signal head replacements are not. And that project could have very well just been putting in for the crosswalks and have a separate dedicated pot of funds for those sort of maintenance and asset replacements to do the mast arm replacement and the signal head replacement. So that's kind of what we're getting at there. Conversely, we also had bridge projects. The project is mainly to replace a bridge. We want to replace this 2-lane bridge with another 2-lane bridge, but we want to add a sidewalk to the bridge. And in that particular instance, 90 to 95% of the project cost is replacing the existing asset. And this is where the board just felt uncomfortable that, this Smart Scale money was carved out and set aside with state of good repair being sort of fully funded or 45% off the top, and didn't want Smart Scale to be used as sort of a supplement to the state of good repair carve out. So that's what it's getting at. And the examples I show here that are eligible would be situations where you have to replace those assets in order to do a larger improvement. So say we're going in and doing turn lane improvements at a particular intersection and constructing a shared use path, and the mast arms are in the way, or the current signal system can't accommodate the pedestrian crossings and the ped heads, then in that particular instance, that signal replacement could be part of a larger improvement. It's not mostly the repair or replacement. And in that particular instance, that would be an eligible project cost as part of the project. And then similarly, you could have a bridge replacement project that's already funded, and you're going after Smart Scale money to add some enhance some features to it, like add a sidewalk, and that would be eligible. It's really what is the project scope mostly doing? Is it a repair or replacement, or is it getting at operations and capacity expansion, things of that nature? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Add?
Yes.
The other reminder is that the guide includes a discussion of eligibility requirements, so that is also available to everybody. And then we also sent out an email to our COs and have a couple of questions for that. If you want me to read those, and we can address those.
Yeah, so to just show y'all where to get to the technical guide, because the technical guide lays out everything in detail, if you go to the Smart Scale website and just click here under resources, and you don't want to drill down, these are previous year's technical guides. You want to click you want to click resources here, and this is the technical guide that goes very much in detail for the application limits, the eligibility requirements, readiness, so on and so forth. And it was actually this technical guide that we used to develop the interface for the pre-application.
Okay.
Chad,
Yes.
Chad, this is Rahul from NOAA. We have a few questions. The first one is there a definition for economically distressed area? And
There
what
is.
happens?
So we're using, and I'm drawing a blank here. I can dig up the PowerPoint that goes in detail of how we're actually doing this. There's a data set that uses essentially 7 indicators of economic distress: the unemployment rate, the number of percentage of the population that doesn't have a college degree. There's 7 different criteria, and it's actually done at the zip code level. And what I can do is I'll include in the follow-up information that goes out after this training session a link to a presentation that describes that in more detail. But essentially every area of the state is ranked, or every zip code in the state is ranked on a continuum between 0 and 100. 100 being an area that has, I believe, the least economic distress, all the way down to a 0. It might be the opposite of that. But essentially, we will assign up to 0.5 point depending on where the particular area, where the improvement is, where that zip code falls within this continuum. And that was something that the board requested an enhancement to back, I believe it was in June.
The technical guide also includes a discussion of the economically distressed index and a link to the site that you can look at and see at the zip code level what the economic factors are and the area types already. So that information is also available in the technical guide.
Thank you, Chad. Another question was, what happens to a pre-application that is not pre-screened?
If the applicant does not request pre-screening, they would essentially go directly into the full application. And one of the things that I didn't mention that I should have, and I apologize, everything you enter on the pre-application gets ported over to the full application. So all the project features that you've checked and your project description and all that stuff goes over and gets entered into automatically the full application. So in the case where an applicant doesn't request pre-screening, essentially doesn't trigger that workflow on our end, and they go directly into the full application and can continue working on that particular project.
So basically, they are taking the risk on their own, yeah. Okay,
That is true.
Yeah. The third question was, some proffers may not fully fund a project. So when we click there is a proffer, will it allow you to indicate?
Oh, you are right, man. I should have demoed that. I apologize. So let me go back to that here under eligibility. So let's say the project does include a proffer. I say yes, and I apologize. I forgot to demo this. This is where you get prompted to just describe the commitment. You can say, developers on the hook for constructing a shared use pass, which we've included as part of this project, but is not part of the project cost or requested amount. So you can describe the proffer, or alternatively, you can upload a document type with development project zoning / proffer reference, which details what that commitment is. So we did build functionality within the pre-application to be able to describe. So just clicking yes doesn't necessarily indicate risk. We just want to know what that proffer condition is.
Okay, there is one more on project readiness, Chad. It says, what level of technical analysis fulfills major widening, corridor optimization, and alternatives, a paragraph or concept or VCM analysis, and improvements to existing corridor or alternative corridors?
Yeah, it would. We have not set a specific bar But if an applicant did highway capacity analysis or a synchro analysis, or worked with their respective MPO to have a modeling run done and just documented that and say a technical memo, that would be more than likely would be sufficient. So say for a major widening, just show that you've looked at, are there ways that you can enhance the existing capacity of the roadway before we go and add additional travel lanes. So if you've got a 4-lane divided facility with lots of signals and lots of access points, and the ADT doesn't look like it's getting completely out of hand, it may make more sense to evaluate, hey, are there things we can do to make this corridor operate more effectively by reducing the number of signals or converting the signals to two-phase operation and fixing some of the access management issues. So we just want to show that there's been some effort on behalf of the applicant to sort of evaluate, because we did find in round 2 and in round 1 there would be fairly substantial projects and projects north of $100 million where there was no applicable study and no indication that there had really been any analysis of that project. And that's concerning, both to the state as well as to the CTB, that, $100+ million improvement really should have gone through some sort of planning process to show that project is warranted and that that's the preferred alternative. But we will not require a 150-page report. We just want to show that there's been some due diligence to assess potential options to optimize the existing corridor.
Hey, Chad?
Thanks, Chad.
Yeah.
That's all we have.
Okay.
Hey, Chad?
Yeah, Ron, what's up?
2 quick questions that we have here in the Richmond district group we have here. One's kind of a 2-parter. How much money is expected to be available this round? And if you're awarded a project, when are you expecting the funds to be available? Basically what fiscal year? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is, if you've done an application before, are you going to be able to import that into this pre-application, or how's that going to work?
Yes, you will be able to clone from previous rounds, and all the applicable data that can crosswalk will get pulled over into the new application. With respect to how much money is available, I'm not sure if Kim's on the line.
Yep.
I've seen it's going to be somewhere between, what, 800? You want to answer that?
Sure, it'll be about $800 to $1 billion available beginning FY24 and 25.
Hi, Chad. This is Katie Shannon from Virginia Beach. I had a couple of questions on the pre-application.
Sure.
You mentioned, I guess once you submit the pre-application and if you choose to have it vetted, once that is vetted through VDOT, then you would have access to the full application?
No, once you hit submit, so let's say you request pre-screening, once you hit submit, regardless of whether you request pre-screening or not, you will go into the full application and we'll be able to continue to work. So if you requested pre-screening, you hit submit, you'll go into the full application, we'll be able to continue to work while a workflow gets triggered on our end to go in and assess, does the project meet a VTrans need? Is the project eligible, and is the project ready? And we'll do our best to try to give you a fairly quick turnaround, 2 weeks. But I will say this, if you wait until the very end to request a pre-screening, then if we get a glut of 300-400 requests to pre-screen all at once at the very end, then it's probably going to push that back a little bit. But we will do our best to try to get you a response fairly quickly.
So if you submit in April, you don't have to wait until June for the full application?
No.
Okay.
You'll be able to continue working on it. Yep.
And you said that the pre-application information would be ported over. I'm assuming the full application, just thinking back to previous rounds, information is mostly related to schedule and cost and then additional documentation?
Yes. So there's remember the factors, Pearl? So there's some questions you'll have to answer on that. And then just like you said, detailing out the cost estimate. You'll notice the pre-application doesn't have anything about cost estimates or schedules. And that's because that tends to be something that takes a little while to develop. if you're working with the district or you're working with DRPT to try to get that reviewed and get feedback on it. So that wouldn't be required into the full application, but would be one of the things that you would be filling out during the full application.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Yeah, Chad, we had a couple questions by email. So first question, Jared. It was related to the limit on the pre-screening of the applications. And so let me answer that along with a couple other points about the pre-apps, mostly just to reiterate some of what Chad has already brought up. So there is no limit to the number of pre-applications that can be created. You can't create new applications after June 1st. There is a limit to the number that you can request for pre-screening, and that limit is based on your application limit, and that's a file that's posted online on that Resources tab. So your application limits are already available to you. Once you request pre-screening, you cannot go back and actually, once you submit the pre-application, you cannot go back and edit the pre-application. You can only edit then from within the full application. And as Chad just said, once you hit submit for the pre-application, the full application is available to you. The feedback, we'll try to turn that around quickly for you, as Chad also said. It will be come to you through kind of an email notification, and then certainly through comments and phone calls and emails, however you all have been communicating already, that we'll be able to communicate to you. Remember, this is just providing you feedback. It is not an official screening in or out decision. It is just feedback. You could potentially modify your application such that it would become eligible, ready, or screen in. So just remember that this is just that early feedback to you all and not the official screening decision. Okay, the second question we had is related to the mapping. The mapping tool, are you able to label or name each individual polygon for each of the areas to give them a different ID as to what they represent? So, Chad, in your example, when you had the sidewalks, were you able to label each of those areas that you drew? I don't believe you can, but...
I don't believe so.
Good question.
David Cook, that was from you. Does that answer your question, or any other questions related to that?
It does, thank you. I mean, maybe something to think about in future iterations as far as down the line.
And David, I actually found myself the other day when I was prepping for today's training, like, can I edit this area to say that's the parking ride or what have you? But that functionality does not currently exist. But I agree that would be helpful in the future to be able to label specific features.
All right, good deal. Thanks.
All right, any other questions? I know this is a lot to digest.
Hey, Chad, we have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, Chad, this is Paul from Fredericksburg. Can we get a copy of this presentation?
Yes, you can. I've got a PDF version that I've sent out to each. Yep.
We'll post it online today.
Okay, great.
And then a recording, once we get that downloaded and kind of clean it up, if any cleanup's necessary, we'll get that posted online as well. Those will both be posted on the resources page.
Thank you so much.
Hey, Dave, first question. Ed, does DRPT have resources to help the transit operators, too, that they can reach out to? Any guidance?
Yes, Katie Schwing is taken over from Jatinder and has been coordinating with the transit providers and all, and we'll be making resources available in this round to sort of assist those transit applicants on any projects they may be thinking about submitting for round 3.
Hey, Chad, this is Eric in Hampton Roads. We had a question trying to figure out what's lost between the pre-app and the full application. And if a locality puts in a pre-app, can it be deleted or what happens?
Before you submit, you do have the ability to delete the pre-application. I say you started on something and realize, oh, I need to start from scratch. You do have the ability to delete the pre-application. what ports over would be your, a lot of information from your general portal ports over, your location map, what needs you've checked, any supporting documents that you've uploaded. I think these questions here essentially would be what you would not see in the full application. The risk assessment questions under project eligibility and project readiness.
Hey, Chad?
Go ahead.
Where you checked, for example, widen existing lanes, no new lanes, that would auto-select that same feature in the full application, but then they would still have to provide detailed information about it.
Yes. But if you'll remember in the full application last year when you checked widen existing lanes, there's a little, detailed description box next to it. We felt like that would be a lot to request as part of the pre-app, as Margie just mentioned. So when you hit submit in the full application, you would see this box checked under project features, and you would need to go in and type the detailed description with respect to that feature.
Okay, but I think before in our conversation you said if I forgot to check one of those blocks early on when I got to the full application, I could check it then.
Yes, you can make changes to the full application once you're in that mode. Yes.
Okay. All right.
And just to go back to make sure it's clear on the app limits, as Margie's mentioned and as I've mentioned, let's say you're an applicant with a cap of 4, and you're working with your board of supervisors and you've got, say, 6 projects that y'all have identified to potentially submit. You would be able to create pre-applications for all 6. You would only be able to request pre-screening on 4 of them, but you could submit all 6. You could go in and continue working in the full application on all 6. But in the end, when you get to the final submission deadline, you're going to have to select the 4 that you're going to submit. So 2 of them would remain in pending status and would never be submitted. Because once you hit that app limit when you're submitting, the system essentially will not let you submit above your app cap. Now, with that being said, I do encourage every applicant to really focus on the highest priorities. The reason I say this is, let's say you've got a cap of 4 or a cap of 10 and you've got 15 in the system, the state staff is going to try to do its best to assist you and to review those and to review them before you submit them so that if any issues get caught. And if we don't know which ones are your highest priorities, it does present somewhat of a drain on resources and all. So I'm not encouraging applicants to put into the system well above your app cap. But in case you're in a situation where your board hasn't really established the final priorities yet, you may decide that you want to have an extra one in the system. Or let's say, one of the 4 that you requested pre-screening, you get told, hey, there's a good chance this is going to get screened out. You might have an extra one in there that you, decide to submit in its place.
Hey, Chad, you did mention earlier that doing the pre-screening, that responsibility rests with both the district and central office. Yes,
pre-screening, there will be a team with OIP that's going to assess the VTrans needs, and then the district and the central office, whether it's at DRPT or VDOT, will go in and will assess the project readiness and project eligibility. And once that workflow is completed and a decision is made, we'll hit a submit button. The applicant will receive an email with feedback. And it will be either, your project is looking like it's going to screen in based on the information you provided, or it's going to point out specific issues that you may be at risk for screening out on. And that's going to be one of the 3 things. Either it doesn't meet a VTrans need, it's not eligible, or it's not ready.
Hey, Chad, One quick
Yeah.
might be helpful to show everybody. Can you maybe go to your first application and go ahead and hit the submit button and then go back to the dashboard?
Okay.
I think you requested that one for pre-screening. You can submit that as a request for pre-screening. If you notice on this app, dashboard right now, there's nothing in that pre-screen column.
All right. The project one, go to supporting documents. I think it was about ready to roll, wasn't it? Yep. Pre-screen, yes. Everything looks good. I'm going to hit submit. Now, one of the things it's not going to do here, I won't be able to demonstrate the full application functionality because that's still being finalized and still the finishing touches on the code here over the next couple of weeks. But as Margie indicated, when I go back to the dashboard, you'll see the application submitted. With this blue bar, continue until I get the confirmation box. Oh, there. I've gone into sort of the full app functionality that you'll remember from last year: location, features, factors. You know, there is some cool stuff we're going to show y'all related to economic development sites on the 27th. That's an area where we've definitely made some major improvements, and I think y'all will really appreciate that. So if I go back to the dashboard here, let me hit save. So you'll see example project 1 is now in the pre-screening status. And it'll go through that workflow here. So it's no longer a pending pre-application. It's an actual pending full application that you can continue to work on. Any other questions?
Yeah. Hey, Chad, this is Paul from Fredericksburg again. I know there's going to be some training on the 27th of February. Has the time for that been set?
Margie, have we set a time yet?
Yeah, we're going to do it from the same time as this one, from 10 to 12, 10 a.m. to 12, and I will get the website updated today when we post the PowerPoint for today's session.
Thank you.
Hey, Rick. John Miller.
Yeah. Now, just as a reminder on that training on the 27th, the training on the 27th is going to essentially, we're going to go over what we just went over, probably a little bit quicker, but we're also going to go over the full application. So we'll go through the next step after you've submitted your pre-application. We'll continue on and show, you know, how you would fill out the full application and some of the enhanced functionality for the full application. All right, any other questions? All right, well, with that, we will get the training schedule updated on the website. We'll also include the presentation that I went over. That also includes the screenshots I mentioned, so you can look through those. And then the recording we'll probably have up sometime next week. It's going to take a little while for it to finish processing, and we'll definitely get that uploaded to the website so you can go back and reference this recording if you'd like. In the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your district or SmartScale point of contact. And you can also send me or Margie an email, and we will do our best to answer any other questions you might have. All right. Thank you, everyone.